Hey, LinkedIn, welcome to another episode, or I haven't done a live in a really long time. So I'm glad to be coming live with two other ugly mugs. Good friends of the show, the Jerich Show, one of my favorite shows that I like to listen to on YouTube. Eric, Crone, and Javad Malik, welcome, boys. How are y'all doing today?
We're quiet. We're very quiet.
Yeah, it's really weird to hear you guys like quiet, because like a second ago there was like no silencing either one of you.
For the first time, we're trying to be civil and give each other the chance to speak first. But thank you very much for having us. As leader of the group, I appreciate you inviting us.
And so just so that people know the division in the Jerich Show, the leader is Javad, the secretary slash scheduler slash coordinator slash team maker is Eric. Did I get that right?
He always tries to convince people that I'm his personal assistant. So you might see him.
It worked for me.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see how this goes.
It's actually on my out of office as well. Whenever I'm out of the office, I'm like, I can't get to you, but if you have any queries, contact my PA, Eric Crone.
Yeah, I take real good care of that.
Every email he gets, he goes, what do you want from Javad? No, he's we're firing him. Like, you shouldn't pay attention to him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. For those, if this is your first time watching, we kind of came up with the idea of summarizing every month, kind of doing this live and summarizing what happened last month. Now, granted, today's October 7th, so we're kind of 7 days after September, but today is Vladimir Putin's birthday. So it's a very special day.
It is. That's wonderful to know. I forgot to send him a present. Don't know what to say about that. I wonder if Amazon will deliver same day.
In Russia, I don't know, but I wonder what kind of cake he likes. Like when I saw the news that today was Putin's birthday, I was like, I wonder what kind of cake Putin has for his birthday. Like, does he get like one of those like single like cupcakes with one candle on it, right? Because he's Putin, or do like the people that work for him in the Kremlin like go and buy a big cake with like boobs on it, and they're like, Mr. President, we brought you best cake in all Moscow, best cake, Mr. President. Like, I'm curious, like what kind of cake does Vladimir Putin get for his birthday?
I'm telling you, the frosting is going to be made from the tears of his enemies. That's pretty much how it's got to start, right? We know the guy's an ex-spook. We know he's not the nicest guy in the world. So I'm just thinking that's where it's got to be.
You watch it. Vladimir Putin is a stand-up guy. He poisons his enemies. All right? He poisons them, old school style. He puts poison on their doorknobs, in their food, in their cars. I mean, that is old school James Bond kind of stuff. You got to appreciate that.
Can you imagine? He's probably got a food taster and actually like applying for that role or being drafted into that role. Congratulations. You are going to get to work with Mr. Putin as his food tester. And you're like, all right, no, I'll get my stuff in order.
No, niet, хорошо, niet. I wonder if like his cyber army does like a very special like PowerPoint for Vlad every year, right? Like this year, all the hacks we've done.
Happy birthday to you. I don't know.
I will remember you.
Oh goodness.
There's probably so many lists. There's lists of journalists that have unfortunately fallen out of helicopters or fallen down open elevator shafts onto some bullets. Great tragedies happen there. I just don't understand it. But
it's Russia. I mean, weird stuff happens in Russia. Have you never seen like one of the Bourne movies? Like the Bourne movies is pretty much like the American version of James Bond. I still don't understand why we don't have more Bourne movies.
Agreed. Those are awesome. They really are.
Yeah.
I'll tell you with the Russian thing, one of the things about Russia is my understanding is, and from what I've seen, the Russian people are like super nice, awesome people. It just sucks that their government is so like messed up, right?
I can tell you, I spent time in Russia. The Russian people are very nice people. By the way, they love American cars. Like, they might be the only people on Earth that actually prefer to buy American cars. Like, even Americans don't buy American cars.
To be fair, we don't try to buy Russian cars, though, either. So,
well, we don't have Russian. I mean, have you ever seen a Russian car? It's called a Lada.
Yeah.
A lot of what?
One kind.
No, it's Lada. It's one kind. They just and just so you know, so for everyone who it's so funny. I remember when I was in Russia, they had the Lada, and they go, yeah. And the guy I was speaking with, who was at the company I was visiting in Russia, this was in a town called Nizhny Novgorod, which is about 480 kilometers north east of Moscow. So it's on the they actually don't during the summer there's only maybe 2 to 3 hours of nightfall, and you can see the green lights, like the Nordic green lights, and all, like a very, very beautiful city. Like, the cleanest air I've probably ever breathed in my life was there. And I'm asking the guy there, and I go, like, what's a Russian car? And he goes, it's a Lada, and let me show you. And he shows me downstairs, and he points to a Lada, and he goes, this is new model. I go, is it? He goes, yes, now they have new color. It used to be just yellow. Now it comes in black and white. And I'm like,
innovation.
Courage.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, well.
Yeah. Let government run your car industry. See, you'll end up with a bunch of Ladas. And by the way, the Lada is like a tank. Like, that car is made out of pure steel.
Well, it's got to last. It's like the only one anyone's ever going to be able to buy over there, right?
Pretty much, unless you're like a gangster. Which, by the way, they love Mercedes and they love Cadillacs.
Gotcha.
Like, those are like, they love Caddies, they love Benzes, obviously, and so.
Awesome.
So let's talk a little bit about, we've wished Vladimir Putin a happy birthday, and we're grateful for everything he does for the cyber industry. Without his help in the cyber industry, none of us would have jobs, really. So thank you for the job security, Vlad. Really appreciate it. Mazel tov, as they say. And I got to tell you, how I found out it was his birthday? I woke up this morning and I'm going through my Twitter feed because, like any normal human being, like, you go through Twitter, you go, how bad is today going to be? You just go through Twitter, right? Yeah. You realize how bad a day is just by going through, like, your first 10, like, tweets on Twitter. And there was a tweet from Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, going, I just called our good friend Vladimir Putin to wish him a happy birthday. I was like, oh, it's Putin's birthday today. It's like, brilliant.
Yeah. Speaking of bad days, I mean, yesterday was a rough one. We lost a couple of pretty good musicians, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Eddie Van Halen, and then I Can See Clearly Now. I can't remember his name. I think it was before my time.
I Can See Clearly Now.
Yeah, the guy who sang that one. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But, wow, I mean, 2020 keeps hitting us, that's for sure.
Look, I'm just saying, let's get rid of all the bad shit. This year's got like 2 months left. Let's just get it all done with now. Because in 2021, I don't want anyone to die. Right? I don't want to hear anything about the plague. I want to hear about hackers getting arrested. I want to have real cybersecurity, real cyber tranquility, cyber peace.
So you're going to be out there on January 1st and you're in the middle of your street swinging your arms around, singing like you're in the Swiss Alps, right?
I hope it rains that day. I hope it rains that day. I really want to go outside and just like be like, welcome 2021, and it's raining outside. That'll be a really fun video.
Over your head. Welcome 2021. Like,
boombox.
Sorry.
Javad just gave us all his age.
Yep. I can see Javad as a youngster with the boom box and a little piece of cardboard he's carrying around. So when he does his head spins, he's good on that.
When he break dances.
Right.
Did you break dance in the streets of London as a youngster, Javad?
No. I was never much of a dancer. But
Javad will admit he was born in the wrong country. He's about as an American as a UKer as I know. he loves American things like Knight Rider and all of that. Yes.
Yeah, so probably not the wrong country. I think I obviously I grew up in the 80s, fed the diet of Knight Rider, Airwolf, Street Hawk, The Fall Guy, The Dukes of Hazzard, and I thought America was a wonderful place. And then I came there and I met you, Eric, and now I've
And
gone
now
back on
you've ruined
on
it.
my initial assessment.
You've destroyed it, Eric. I mean,
Yeah.
and mind you, he also went to like North Florida.
Well, you know, he says this, but he keeps coming back. And we go to California. We took a trip to Miami. I don't know if you saw that video. We took a trip to Miami and then out to Dallas, I think it was, wasn't it?
Did you guys drive to Miami from Tampa?
We did. We thought that would be wise. It's a 5-hour drive. It took us, 12 and a half, something like that.
Never ever travel with Eric. He is absolutely cursed. And this is true story. In the office, anytime anyone has ever traveled with Eric, they've got delayed horrendously.
True
And
story.
every time it's always like planes, delays, airports, you know how it is. But even when everything's in your control, we have our own car, we have our own sat nav. For the first half hour, we were heading in the wrong direction, opposite from Miami. So I don't know where he was taking us.
Well,
you
it started
going-
before that. We got to the rental car place. The car wasn't there. They're like, this is a problem. So we got to jump in a car with one of the other guys and go drive around, try to find our car.
So you had a Seinfeld episode of a car reservation. You know how to take a reservation, but you don't know how to hold a reservation.
Pretty much, yeah. And then we got the car and the trunk was too small for anything, so we had to throw bags in the back seat. And
What
it
did
was-
you
it was
rent? A
great-
Mazda 2?
No, it was a convertible Camaro. We had to have the convertible Camaro. I wanted to give them the American experience.
A convertible Camaro. So you got him
Yeah.
a convertible Camaro, and you realized that the trunk had no space for nothing. What's a back seat for?
Apparently luggage.
Luggage, yeah.
Yeah, that's what a backseat in a convertible is, for luggage.
Yeah, that's about what it boiled down to, yeah.
But he got us a convertible Camaro in the height of bug season. And what were they called? Love bugs.
Love bugs. So if you've been to Florida, we have these bugs. They stick together like on the back end, and they are a plague. Okay, and these things, I mean, literally, you go through like swarms of these things. It's a horrible thing. So yeah, in the convertible
With the top down.
Yeah.
So you guys were pretty much, you guys should have just written a bunch of Harleys. You guys would have had a better chance.
smack. Yeah.
I'll tell you this story about another one of our colleagues, James. And this is before me and James both joined there. We were at an IAC Squared Congress a few years ago, and this was in Anaheim, I believe. Anyway, they have this the Gala Awards night, and it was like a Hollywood theme sort of thing. And James and I came up with a great idea. Why don't we go hire a couple of Harleys and ride up to the venue on our Harleys? So we had a matching. Well, we had black and white spy versus spy sort of theme, like the 50s style hat and the white suit and a black suit. And we thought if we rock up in two Harleys, it would be great. Now, I ride a bike. I've got a bike and I ride it around London all the time. So I'm well versed in bikes. And James hadn't ridden a bike for a few years, let's put it that way. So we go there, we get these two Harleys, it's brilliant. And we get to the first junction and it's a right turn. So I'm like, okay, James, whenever you're ready. And James looking left, right, and he goes to pull off, and he sees a car coming. He panics. He lets go of the clutch. Basically, he ends up going into the middle of the junction, falls off. Bike slides one way. He slides another way. Cars slamming on their brakes on either side. And that was the end of our Harley adventure. So, so literally within 5 minutes of renting the Harley, we were back in the shop and say, yeah, I think a foot peg might be broken and a few lights, and we put a dent in your petrol tank. So
that's his side of the story. But this is why I didn't want to do a Harley. I figured he'd try to kill me too.
I think riding motorcycles is the way to do it. But you can't ride a motorcycle in Florida. The bugs are just the swamps and the bugs, man. Like, you got to have like an interchangeable bandana every 10 minutes. You're like,
yeah, it's like those tear-offs, the Oakley tear-offs.
Right.
Or the ones they have in the NASCARs where it just like automatically slides up for the camera. Something like that. Yeah. Good times.
So let's talk a little bit cyber. So last month, we had what I like to call a very busy Patch Tuesday, right? Zerologon, which apparently no one got the memo on Patch Tuesday, and an alert needed to come out from Microsoft, I'm pretty sure once every 3 days, to let people to know that, hey, people are actually taking advantage of it. Patch this. And it's still not patched. Like literally this morning, I saw another alert from Microsoft. Why is it that we can't really patch these critical vulnerabilities?
Javad, you want to go?
This is the classic case of the boy that cried wolf. As an industry, we shout from the rooftops about how everything is critical. I think just last year I read it earlier today, I think there was something like 13,000 new vulnerabilities disclosed. And when you look at the CVE's distribution, like most of them are 8 or 7 or above. And I think that's fundamentally what the issue is. People they just don't believe us anymore. We say, hey, there's a new vulnerability and the internet is falling down and the sky is following rapidly after it. And there's no context often given to people and organizations. And this is wrong from both the side of whoever's announcing the vulnerability. Oftentimes we have this so there's 3 factors. There's vendors who want to say, hey, quickly patch this, but keep it on the down low because it makes their product look bad, or maybe they just want, they don't want to attract too much attention to it. You have the researchers that might have found it and they want to look good, so they'll patent a domain name and a logo to go along with it, and they want to be like, hey, invite me to speak at DEF CON next year because look at this great vulnerability I found. And then you have internal security people within organizations who are like either blasé about stuff, like they're overwhelmed, or they're like, hey, this is amazing, this is terrible, let's do this quickly, without doing the groundwork that's needed beforehand, before going to their execs and saying, okay, this is how many of these things we have, this is our risk exposure, basic fundamentals. I think the tooling isn't there, or the knee-jerk reactions sometimes come from top down. And so I think it's that miscommunication that leads to a lot of these things being overlooked.
Well, and I think last month there were 120 vulnerabilities in Patch Tuesday, something like that.
Yep.
So that's a lot of things to have to sort through and figure out. Not only criticality, and we can't just look at criticality, right? So I think 33 of them were considered critical, but critical for who, right? Critical for whom? Do you have this in place? Do you have other things mitigating it? Those are always challenges with that. So people have to stop and figure out what is really something that impacts me. Okay. The other thing about patches is we all know if we've done them, they can wreak havoc, right? So you're talking about a patch here, for a vulnerability that affects domain controllers, if I'm reading this correctly and remember this right. It's a domain controller attack. And so domain controllers is not one of those things that you want to go out and lightly patch and reboot, right? Having deployed a good chunk of the U.S. Army's domain controllers across North America, we learned very quickly that applying patches can be a dangerous thing in those situations. So you have to be very careful, and you have to weigh that versus the criticality. So things aren't necessarily a big deal when they come out, especially if they're not being actively exploited, right? There are tons of vulnerabilities that come out that are never exploited. But once it starts becoming exploited, now the noise has to come in. But it takes time to test these. It takes time to make sure these things work. And, while domain controllers are best left to do their own things, we all know that there's a lot of SMBs out there that have the domain controller doing 10 other functions too. So the minute you start patching something with NetLogon, who knows what else is going to break with that as well. So I think that's another part of it.
So you both bring up really good points, which is along the area of what Javad said early on, which is fatigue, and then the multi-use of it, and the fact that patching isn't as easy or simple. But at the same time, what we end up seeing every Patch Tuesday, and it's really very interesting, is we see a bunch of vulnerabilities, right? It starts with Microsoft, goes to Adobe, and everyone else. And then we want organizations to get it done in 24 hours. And then we start to see the heat.
Yep. Yep. And that's undoable. It's unsustainable. I mean, there's no way you can do that and perform any sort of regression testing or make sure that it's not going to take down things that you had no idea it's going to take down. There's no way to do that. And many times, you're looking at in organizations, especially in leadership, they're going to be weighing risk, right? So this is risk-based stuff. So how much does X amount of time with things being down, how much would that cost us versus the potential for being attacked, and what's the risk there? And sometimes that just weighs into, we need to be cautious.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the CVSS score, right? The criticality rate of it, of a 7.1 or a 8.9 or a 9.9. So can we agree that these are just pointless because they're essentially put on by the manufacturer and everything's going to be a 9.9 almost always?
On my phone, I have Eric saved under the name CVSS because it is absolutely pointless. And that's how I feel about it.
I don't agree with that necessarily. I think that the CVSS scores serve a purpose in a way. So they're supposed to be based on things like, is this remotely executable, or do you have to be local to it? And these are all the things that are supposed to impact the CVSS score. It's not just something that the vendor says, oh, it's a this, right? It's supposed to be a conglomeration of things that build up that score. And while you don't just go through and pick the top, all of the criticals and the number nines, if they don't really impact you and go patching against them, it does give you something to weigh. If you have 30 different things that you need to look at, it does give you a way to at least have some sort of way to try to figure out what is more important than others. It's not perfect by any means, but I don't think it's quite to the point of being pointless, in my opinion.
See, I think this is where we disagree. Like many things, we disagree on everything in life. The problem is just the sheer volume. Our tooling hasn't really evolved to the point, and I know there are probably some vendors watching this and they're going to disagree, say we can use AI or machine learning to do it. And I say, great, let's have more development in that. But I don't think we're there today. And even if you have to sort through 30 and maybe 10 of them are rated with like an over 8 or a 9 and the rest are low, that's still 8 to 10 things you have to go through. And I don't think people have the knowledge to hand internally to go through, like, okay, which one of these do we have? How many of them are exploitable? How many of them do we have some other compensating controls? How many of these can we safely patch? Or how many of these do we have a test environment where we can test the patch? So there are lots of variables that add to it. So it's kind of like it's a very, very loose and abstract way of saying, here's something, it could be bad. But it's a bit like when sometimes when we have our team calls Eric, and so the whole team, most of the team is based in Florida, and they're like, oh, there's a hurricane warning this week. And for me, that's like, well, okay, I care about, people, my colleagues, but it's not going to impact me. I'm not going to start boarding up my windows or anything. So
no, but if they suffer a hurricane, you're the one having to pick up all the work.
Well, with Eric out the way, there is nothing to pick up, honestly.
You see, if I had feelings, James, I would be destroyed by the way he attacks me constantly. But I don't, so we're okay. And I don't disagree with you, Joe. There are definitely, it does become fatiguing anyways. I think that some organizations are better able to handle that, especially the larger organizations that may have teams and they may have very defined processes around patching. The smaller and mid-size, where it's one or two folks in the shop, that's a very different story. But it's diverse across the board. And I do think there is some value in it. Again, I don't think it's a fix-all, end-all, but I think it can help in some ways at least.
Well, so you say that. So, sorry, James. I just like let me not just cut down Eric once more before he finishes that thought. Larger companies aren't sometimes better. They have more staff, yes, but they have so much complexity and they have legacy systems, and they aren't always best equipped to know what all their assets are and which version they're running at and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's easier for smaller or mid-sized organizations, especially if they've adopted a mainly cloud infrastructure and things are being pushed out by the vendor automatically or what have you. So it does really vary, and sometimes being smaller is better.
Well, and the business model will vary too, because someone that can't afford to have something down for 10 minutes because it costs them, a $250,000 a minute, they're going to have a different focus and be able to do things differently
Yeah,
than,
but then, but at that point, you're talking about environments, right? So
right.
having maybe a blue environment and a green environment, one that you can patch and turn on, and then another one that you can go back in, patch again, turn on, and you can revert, and so forth. It's very interesting to me because a lot of organizations don't look at those simultaneous environments and understand the investment that's needed in there. And I think that's one of the failures of security, folks. I think the failure of security is not being able to have two parallel environments that operate parallel to each other. So when something bad happens, when happens, you're able to really kind of isolate and run a parallel network and really reduce your stoppage time. And I feel like a lot of people look at this, but with the cost of cloud today, right, and the cost of running images in cloud, it's really not that expensive.
There are some limitations to cloud, like, coming out of DoD where I was, one of the things that we would do, obviously we couldn't cloud anything because we were the Army and dealing with sensitive things. But, one of the things that we would do is when it came time for critical patches, we would shut down half of our domain controllers, patch the other half, make sure things were working well, and then bring them up. That way, if, because they're redundant by nature, essentially, if something went horribly bad, we just shut down the ones we patched, rebuild those while the other ones are back up and running. And we learned that as a way to do that. We did have a test environment. It was not identical in every way to what's out there, but there's ways to get around that. We just have to think about, different ways to do that and test your patches. But that takes time.
It does take time, but the cost, when you look at organizations today that are so reliant on specific programs, apps, and so forth, having a parallel is almost common sense at this point. It's the cost of doing business.
Yep, agreed.
And we don't see that as often. Let's talk a little bit about alert fatigue. Okay, because we talk about Zerologon, and Zerologon is going to be in the news for quite some time. But alert fatigue, every day, when you go through your LinkedIn feed or Twitter feed or email feed, you have an alert from the FBI, from CISA, who are trying to do their job and warn people of what's happening. You have vendors with alerts, but we have an alert fatigue. And, now it's October. It's National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, right? So now we have cyber awareness fatigue. So, let's talk a little bit about both of those. What's a way to combat alert fatigue?
You give fewer.
fewer alerts. It's really that simple.
Yes, surely it's that simple. It's like if you're depressed, just be happy, and you won't be depressed anymore. It's that simple. It's really, I was just thinking as we were talking about this quote. I can't remember who said it, but they said if you protect your paper clips and diamonds with the equal vigor, you'll soon have more paper clips than diamonds. And I think that's what alert fatigue does to us, is that when there's so many alerts coming in, you don't have time. You just go into operational mode, and you don't have time to figure out what's a paperclip and what's a diamond and what's worth focusing on and what's not. So the issue is really focus. And so I think the big thing we do need is to have more integrated approaches and more automation built into that. So that works quite well for external threat intel or alerts that come from external. But I think the other big challenge is all your internal alerts that you get, and you end up just throwing more bodies at it. So your SOC just starts growing bigger and bigger because you just want people to respond to those. So I think automation has a big role to play in it, and you really need to whittle things down. But there's also the issue of there's a paradox, and I can't remember the name of this paradox, but it's basically if you say you want to walk 100 meters, you first have to walk 50 meters, so you half it. But to walk 50 meters, you first have to walk 25 meters, which is half. But to get there, you have to walk 12 and a half. But you keep halving it, you find you never actually get to zero. So theoretically, your journey can never begin. And this is the paradox that we face with alerts and with patching them, is that you're never ever going to catch up, because no matter how many you go through, there's always going to be more coming up. So we need to find a way to not only reduce it, but also find an acceptance in there. And we talk a lot about risk assessment and risk appetite. And everyone says, yes, our risk appetite is X until X happens. And then they say, no, you misunderstood us. Our risk appetite was not that. It was X minus 1. So I think it's about getting people also into that mind frame, or organizations in that mind frame. Hey, look, stuff can happen. Things can go sideways. Let's just roll with it and go with it, and not stress out about trying to get every single last alert responded to.
Well, and I think a key point to this too is, when it comes to all of these alerts, not all of them are going to apply to you, right? And one of the biggest things we have issues with, or a large thing that I know I've always struggled with when I've been working in the industry, is making sure I knew what I had, so I knew what applied to me. So if you can figure out what you have, what assets you have, how these things are, and then be able to take some of those alerts and quickly dismiss them and go, not it, through automation, through however else we can do this, it will help where those alerts are then handled quickly, off the radar, and you don't have to worry about them. Now, that doesn't mean you don't get a lot of them that still apply to you, but at least it'll knock out some of them. But the core thing to that is, again, figuring out what it is you have and what may be vulnerable to these certain things, so that you can tie those together. And I hate to do this, but I'm actually going to plug another one of our colleagues who wrote a book called Computer Data Driven Defense.
Roger Grimes.
Roger Grimes, right. And that book, I love that book. And I love that approach, which is to figure out what you have, what's really important, where are the attacks really coming from, right? So if you get a vulnerability that comes out that's all about, one type of attack, but the ones that really cripple you all the time are this type over here, is that really the critical one you need to be spending your time on? Or is the one with less criticality over here the one you should spend your time on, right? That will help you sort through that quickly. And then you have to get to the point that you do the mental decisions, like risk assessments and things like that, which frankly, I don't feel we're at the point where we can necessarily entrust all of that to like AI or automated processes. There has to be a human element at some time, but let's try to knock out the stuff that's really a threat, that's not, and get that other garbage out of the way. It's the only way we're going to deal with it, because we know that the alerts aren't going to slow down. There's more products being put out there. There's more stuff being built. There's more people attacking. There's more researchers finding the vulnerability. So the number of these things that are coming out is never going to go down. It's just going to continue to go up. We just have to cope with it differently.
Well, we say it's never going to, I think it won't go down if we keep our current course. But I do think that you can bring it. And a good example that comes to mind is Canary. The guys at Thinks to produce the product called Canary. I don't know if anyone's familiar. I don't work for them, not affiliated with them. There's not a paid plug, but it's literally like a little device. You plug it into your network and you make it look like whatever you want. So say, hey, you're now a Win2K server. Put these files on it. Create these fake files. And if someone browses to it, tries to open a file, notify me. And that's all it does.
It's deception technology.
It's simpler than deception. Even deception is like you're creating a whole bunch of VMs and you're trying to understand the TTPs of your attackers. But this is literally, you're only detecting lateral movement or someone poking around in the file that in the network that they shouldn't. And I think it just works fine, because you're only maybe going to get alerted one time a year, but then you've got to respond to it. So I think maybe try and re-architect how we look at some of these alerts. Save them for sure, but this whole SIM-based approach where you have to log everything and then you have to alert on everything and then you have to take some action is probably something that people far smarter than you, Eric, should look at.
Hey, I don't know if you remember, Javad, when I was with ISC Squared, I did get a product given to the members for a while. I think they've probably done away with it by now, but it was called Vulnerability Central. And in this, you could set up your profile and you could actually go through and say, these are the types of things I run. Yes, I have Adobe. Yes, I have this. Yes, I have that. And then as the CVSS scores came through, it would actually filter out the things that didn't matter to you. And this was, 4 or 5 years ago. And it was very nice because it could then limit that down a little bit. And I'm talking alerts from, you talk the, CVSS stuff. James, you'd mentioned like the CISA alerts and FBI alerts. So that's a different kind of alerting than SOC alerts, right? So just to be clear where I'm coming from on this sort of stuff, but like the CVSS is the, these vulnerabilities that would help whittle that down. And that was years ago. It was a very simple product that worked very, very well. So I think things like that can certainly help us deal with the onslaught.
Yeah, I mean, but what you're bringing up is kind of the whole thing with most people try to justify their security program by the number of alerts. Right, my performance is justified by how many alerts I respond to. So if I get 1,000 alerts a day, right, that's like a dream world. I think people get some organizations get 1,000 alerts an hour, right? But if I get 1,000 alerts a day, and I respond to 900 of them, well, then we're doing great, right? Yeah. And that's a wrong matrix. That's a wrong KPI. That's a wrong KPI, but it's a KPI that's constantly being used falsely in that aspect of it.
Yeah, that's definitely a wrong way to look at things. Just things like that are just a static number are not a great way to look at performance or what it is you do every day.
Right, but that kind of shows you the gap between, for example, a CISO who's trying to articulate to the business what the security team and what that expense and what those people are doing, right? To in a way that the business would understand it. And so the business would understand we get 1,000 alerts, we're responding to 94% of them. Anyone would understand that. Now, mind you, it's pointless. It has no meaning whatsoever, right? But the business would be like, oh, wow, we're doing pretty well. I mean, I've literally spoken to CEOs where they go, our alert response rate, according to our CISO, is like 98%. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like, help me understand what that means, because I don't know what that means. But the CEO that I'm speaking with is like bragging about this. He goes, we don't have an issue with our security program. Our security program is perfect. And you're like, why? Because you have a 98% response rate? Like, what does that even mean?
Time to detection is 187 days or something like that, right?
Right.
The one that did get through, we found out 6 months later. But we're dealing with all these other things, right? That is a classic wrong type. And honestly, if you're in that role where that's the kind of stuff you're having to report, I think you need to work on some messaging and start working on getting some other numbers in there, and then downplay the one. We have a job when it comes to getting to the leadership, and that is reporting numbers that matter. And it's not easy. It's not fun, but I think we all have a responsibility to start actually giving them numbers that matter, honestly.
Yeah. It reminds me of, Jurassic Park with Jeff Goldblum's character. He's looking at the dinosaurs and he goes like, he says something like, your scientists were so obsessed with figuring out whether they could, they didn't stop to think whether they should.
Yeah.
And this is the case of they're so obsessed with like, let's gather some metric that they don't stop to think whether they should.
But that's one of the challenges. I mean, that's one of the challenges really is metrics and KPIs. That's why Roger's book and kind of Roger's theory on data-driven defense is extremely critical.
Yeah.
Right? Because only when you're able to look at data and start to break down your defense that way can you really find any sort of success.
Yep. And those are the numbers, though, that we have to start reporting again and downplaying the other just sheer volume ones because, some sensor went off a bunch of times or something like that. It's not easy to do, granted, but it's something that does need to be done. And Jeff Goldblum's character did say something else in that movie, which was something akin to, you crazy son of a bitch, you actually did it.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe that's the follow-up to that.
Yeah. I think that there's two parts. It's like figuring out what metrics you can report on in a meaningful way is one thing, but there needs to be that business awareness as well, that you need to tie those somehow to exactly what the business mission is. There's no point in taking a metric that might on its own be a great security metric, but it doesn't really help the mission of the business go forward. So, understanding what business is your organization in, how do they make money, what are their risks, what have they promised to the shareholders? Do you listen to the shareholders call or read the reports? Because that will help you actually align your metrics in a far more important way. It's like, I can't remember who gave the example. I think it might have been Wendy Nather who told me this. It's like me having an umbrella and telling you it stops this many raindrops per second. Well, that's not a good enough metric for anyone. That's literally we respond to this many. But rather, it's like, hey, it allows you to walk to the office and you're dry enough that you don't need to change out your suit, or you don't need to spend 5 minutes under the dryer. So that's really the business objective that sometimes there's a disconnect with. So we're trying to figure out how to report on the umbrella effectiveness, where really we should be reporting on how the umbrella is helping you get to the office in a presentable state.
Yeah.
Leave it to the Londoner to tie it back to rain.
Well, and he also spoke about meters earlier. So he lost half of the crowd that was listening. They're like, did he just say meters? Did he just say meters? What's a meter? We know feet. This is America.
Speak English.
Yeah. They're like, what's a meter? It isn't the Olympics. The only time we care about meters is in the Olympics. And the Olympics were canceled this year, if you recall, Javad. They're next year.
So Javad and I have a running joke about some of the words that we use, like describing cars, the bonnet and, the hood and all that kind of stuff. And he made the comment during our trip, actually, to Miami. He said, we're two countries divided by a common language. And I always loved that. I thought that was a great way to describe that.
Well, I was talking to someone yesterday, and they said that when they lived in Britain for a while, and he went, I had to, change my entire English. And I was like, well, you just had to add you in awkward places in every word, right? Like flavor with you. Like, who writes flavor with a U? The Brits.
Right. It's not Flavo or Flav.
It's not Flavor.
Flavor,
right?
Yeah.
Flavor. It's flavor.
See, it's like I don't know if you've seen the image. There's this, when you I can't remember what software it is, but when you install it and it asks you to select the language, and there's one which says English, which has got the British flag next to it, and then it's like English in brackets simplified, and it's got the American flag next to it. So you guys are the simplified version of English.
I would like to think that we took something that was overdone, overcomplicated, and really just had no purpose. It had like no real purpose. And we've made it better, because that's what America does. We take stuff and we make it better. We took pizza from Italy, we made it better. We took Chinese food from China, we made it better. That's what America does.
I agree.
Happy birthday, Vladimir Putin. That's what we do. What do you do?
So let's talk a little bit. Let's kind of in the last few minutes we have here. National Cybersecurity Awareness Month is this month. It's a lot of people go all year planning for this month, like Putin plans for his birthday in October. And by the way, that's a really interesting thing. National Cybersecurity Awareness Month and Putin's birthday is in the same month.
Might be related. Who knows? We're not saying.
Could it be? Could it be? What is today's National Cybersecurity Awareness tip in the Kremlin?
Right.
Do not click on email that comes from Trump that says, look here, Vlad. Look here, Vlad.
Yeah.
I would pay money to any hacker to just intercept communication between two world leaders via email. Like in their private inbox. Right? Like, I wonder if, Boris Johnson, forwards, chain emails to, Donald Trump or, to Angela Merkel. And he goes, look, Merkel, this is very funny. Ha, ha, ha.
I could imagine them doing it old school. It'll be forward. Be careful. There's an email going around with news of Angela Merkel. Do not open. It's a virus.
You okay, James?
Yeah, the COVID. When I laugh hard, COVID just makes my lungs just go. I'm
And
still
I thought I
recovering.
was just like super funny and you just losing it.
Yeah, I'll give you that, but then I'll also blame it on the China virus for infecting me twice now, 2 times.
Twice. So, National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, in my opinion, is actually a really good thing. It kind of gives us license to go crazy and try to get people to get it, right? It is a good thing because a lot of organizations, they actually take it a step further than your usual don't click on things. They put together like whole different packages, posters, and they really try to drive home the importance of security awareness. And security awareness, let's be clear, is more than just don't click on links, right? It's how you handle passwords. It's whether you're reusing them across different places. Are you using a password manager or multi-factor authentication? It's all of these things together that build a security culture. Do you check people with badges if they're walking around your office without them? All that kind of stuff comes in, and it gives us an opportunity to remind people of that without feeling like, I guess, we're just going over the top because now we have a month dedicated to it. Now we can do that and feel better.
Yeah. Javad, what do you think?
No, I agree with Eric. I think obviously I believe it's something that, you don't need to have a month. It's something you do all year round, but a month helps bring focus. What I've tried to do this year is actually just be very, very specific, and in any interaction, just give just 1 or 2, 3 tips that people can do right now. So I made a video on Twitter and one on LinkedIn, just really short video, just like a minute long, and saying, hey, if you're on LinkedIn right now, go in, and if you haven't changed your password, or if you're reusing your password, make it unique, enable 2FA, check the sessions that are logged on, and check any apps that have permission. So 3 things for you to do: enable 2FA, log out any sessions that you don't need, and check which apps have access to it. And it's just something very specific. It takes people only 5 minutes to do if they understand what these things are. Otherwise, you have to explain a bit. But it's great because people can walk away thinking, hey, that's one less avenue that I'm going to get potentially owned from, going forward. So I think, like, in interactions this month, it's really good just to say to people, hey, do you have a passcode on your phone? Do you have, do you use a password manager? Do you do X, Y? Just give people something just to think about, and just give them something very specific and very actionable to their reality. And I think that would really just help people through this month.
Yeah, I will say this. I find National Cybersecurity Awareness Month to be something extremely valuable for the community, because it brings all these different ideas and all these different collaborations that are really, really good for the industry. From a non-cyber, when we talk about outreach to non-cyber people, having a month dedicated to it and doing a bunch of fun activities is so critical. It's so critical because the people who aren't in security, that are in marketing and operations and finance and DevOps and engineering and you name it, right? Being able to do different activities for them during the month of October has an immense amount of value, especially in terms of promoting security in front of those folks. Mm-hmm. And really trying to achieve a milestone.
It's given us an opportunity to reach people we normally wouldn't. Like in my case, I generally talk to security professionals. I do webinars, I do stuff like that. And my focus is security teams and groups like that. But this month I'm actually doing a number of sessions for a high school. And I'm talking to regular employees and putting together talks and webinars, lunch and learns for different organizations, for their employees, all the way down to the folks that are out on the assembly line, basically putting stuff together. So we're able to get that in front of other people as well and impact them, which, yes, it helps them personally, which I think is fantastic. It also helps the organization. But getting in front of kids, getting in front of the younger generation, the stuff that we normally wouldn't be able to do, this is all great for that.
It is. It's absolutely brilliant. Guys, we are out of time. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. This was a lot of fun for our inaugural episode.
Always a pleasure.
I gotta say that Eric is much funner when you're picking on him, Javad.
Yeah, it's a community service that I provide.
Yeah, has he been in our morning meetings? Have you been like telling him what you do? I mean, they say the same thing.
Like it's great. For those watching, listening, obviously you can subscribe to Jerich Show on YouTube, which you should catch. These two guys go at it. It's a lot of fun discussions. They're also tagged in this LinkedIn post for those watching us now live. Thank you so much for those watching us live here on LinkedIn. We did go at a really early hour today, so for those that did watch, thank you. Typically, LinkedIn Lives, you don't want to start until about 11 a.m. Eastern. We started at 10 today. Well, it's our first test run. We set trends. Yeah. Start early, strike first, strike hard, no mercy. Javad, now you can move your head.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure being here. Thanks for having us. And it's a good talk. I hope to do this more often. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll be back with more, hopefully for wrapping up National Cybersecurity Awareness Month and doing this before the world goes to shit on November 3rd. So until then, folks, we're going to sign off now. We'll be back with so much more. And I'll be back with our normal practitioner brief to wrap up the week tomorrow. Until then, folks, stay cyber safe.